Invest early. Let compound interest work for you. Pay yourself first. Save 20% of every paycheck. Don't leave money on the table. Max out your 401k match. Build an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses. Diversify your portfolio. Stocks, bonds, real estate. You've heard this advice 1,000 times from financial gurus, from best selling books, from well meaning relatives, from TikTok influencers in rented Lamborghinis. It's all technically correct. It's also completely useless for most people. Because here's what nobody tells you: financial advice is class specific. The strategies that work for people with money don't work for people without money. The math that makes sense at $100,000 income breaks down at $40,000. The systems designed for wealth building assume wealth as a starting point. When a millionaire tells you to pay yourself first, they're not lying. They're just speaking a different language, one that translates to nothing in your reality. Today, I'm going to break down why the most common financial advice fails for ordinary people. Not because it's wrong in theory, because it assumes a starting position you don't have. The advice isn't a scam exactly. It's worse. It's a system that blames you for failing to follow rules that were never designed for your situation. 1. The compound interest fantasy. Let me start with the most repeated advice in personal finance. Start investing early and let compound interest do the work. The math is seductive. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25, earning 7% annually, you'll have $1.2 million by age 65. Start at 35 and you'll have only $567,000. Start at 45 and you'll have $244,000. The lesson seems clear. Time in the market beats everything. Start now. The earlier, the better. Here's the problem. Most people at 25 can't invest $500 a month. The median income for Americans 25 to 34 is around $50,000. After taxes, that's roughly $3,300 per month. Average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in America is now over $1,700. That's more than half the take-home pay. Add utilities, transportation, food, insurance, student loan payments. There's no $500 left. There might not be $50 left. The compound interest fantasy assumes spare money exists. For most young people, it doesn't. And the advice to just invest something, even $50 a month, ignores a brutal reality. At $50 a month with 7% returns for 40 years, you accumulate about $120,000. That's not nothing, but it's not the millionaire story. It's not enough to retire on. It's a couple years of expenses. The compound interest math only creates wealth at scale, and scale requires money you don't have. 2. The emergency fund impossibility. Build an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is genuinely good advice. An emergency fund prevents cascading financial disasters. Car breaks down, use the fund. Medical bill, use the fund. Job loss, you have runway. Let's do the math. Monthly expenses for an average household, roughly $5,000, rent, utilities, food, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments. 3 months of expenses, $15,000. 6 months, $30,000. The median American savings account balance is around $5,300. Over 60% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency without borrowing. So the advice to build a $15,000, $30,000 emergency fund is, for most people, advice to do something they're not remotely close to achieving. At $200 a month in savings, an optimistic rate for many, building a 3-month fund takes over 6 years. During those 6 years, emergencies will happen. The fund gets depleted before it's built. This isn't a failure of discipline, it's arithmetic. You can't save what doesn't exist. And here's the cruel part. Not having an emergency fund makes everything more expensive. Without savings, emergencies go on credit cards at 25% interest or to payday loans at 400%. The lack of a fund creates costs that make building the fund harder. The advice assumes you can get ahead of the cycle. Most people are trapped in it. 3. The 401k match mythology. Never leave free money on the table. At least contribute enough to get your employer's full match. This sounds like obvious advice. Your employer offers to match your 401k contributions up to 3% of salary. That's 100% return on investment. Free money. Let's examine who this helps. First, you need an employer that offers a 401k with matching. Many don't. Small businesses, gig economy, retail, food service, these jobs often have no retirement plan at all. About a third of private sector workers don't have access to an employer retirement plan. Second, you need to be able to afford the contribution. That 3% match requires you to contribute 3%. On a $40,000 salary, that's $1,200 a year or $100 a month. We've established that many people don't have $100 a month. The free money requires money to access. Third, many 401k matches have vesting schedules. You don't actually own the employer contribution until you've worked there for 3 or 4 years. In an economy where job tenure averages 4.1 years and less for younger workers, many people leave before they're fully vested. Fourth, 401k funds are locked until retirement. If you withdraw early, you pay penalties and taxes. For someone who might need that money for an emergency, it's not really accessible wealth. The 401k match is great for people with stable jobs at large employers, who can afford contributions, who plan to stay for years, and who have other savings for emergencies. For everyone else, the free money is theoretical. 4. The diversification delusion. Diversify your portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. In theory, diversification reduces risk. Own different asset classes, stocks, bonds, real estate, and a downturn in one won't destroy everything. Who can diversify? To meaningfully invest in multiple asset classes, you need capital. A diversified portfolio might include U.S. stocks, international stocks, bonds, REITs, real estate investment trusts, and maybe commodities. If you have $500 to invest, meaningful diversification is nearly impossible. Each position is so small that transaction costs and minimum investments become barriers. Index funds partially solve this. A single fund can give you exposure to thousands of stocks, but now you're in one fund, which isn't really diversification across asset classes. And you still need money to invest. Diversify into real estate, the gurus say. How? A rental property requires a down payment of tens of thousands of dollars. Even a REIT investment is still part of your tiny overall portfolio. The diversification advice is for people with portfolios worth diversifying. If you have $2,000 in a savings account and $5,000 in a 401k, diversification strategy is irrelevant. You barely have money, let alone a portfolio to optimize. 5. The pay yourself first lie. Pay yourself first. Before you pay any bills, set aside savings. This advice comes from a good place. It recognizes that if you wait until everything else is paid, there's nothing left. So, prioritize savings. Make it automatic. Pay yourself first. Here's why it fails. If you don't pay rent first, you're evicted. If you don't pay utilities first, they're shut off. If you don't pay your car loan first, the car is repossessed. If you don't pay minimum debt payments first, your credit is destroyed and everything becomes more expensive. You cannot actually pay yourself first. Survival needs come first. Obligations come first. Savings get whatever's left, which is often nothing. The people who can pay yourself first are people whose income exceeds their obligations by enough that savings doesn't threaten necessities. They have slack in their budget. They can literally afford to prioritize savings. For people without slack, the advice is impossible to follow, and when they can't follow it, they feel like failures. They internalize that they're bad with money. They're not bad with money. They don't have enough money. 6. The cut the lattes. Insult. Small expenses add up. Skip the daily coffee and invest the savings. This is perhaps the most condescending financial advice ever conceived. Let's do the math. 1 latte per day, $5. Annual cost, $1,825. Invested over 40 years at 7%, approximately $400,000. See? Says the financial guru. Your latte habit is costing you $400,000. First, many people don't buy daily lattes. The average American spends about $1,100 per year on coffee, and that includes home brewing. The hypothetical daily latte buyer is already not most people. Second, even if you save $1,825 per year, that assumes you can invest it. See previous sections about why that's often not possible. Third, giving up small pleasures doesn't solve structural problems. If your rent is 50% of income and your car payment is 20% and your student loans are 10% and your food and utilities take the rest, eliminating lattes doesn't fix anything. The latte advice exists to make wealthy people feel superior and poor people feel guilty. It addresses the one area of spending where poor people might have discretion while ignoring the massive fixed costs that actually determine financial outcomes. You could give up every small pleasure for the rest of your life and still not have enough to retire if your income doesn't exceed your necessary expenses. 7. The live below your means trap. Spend less than you earn, live below your means. This is mathematically tautological. To save money, you must spend less than you earn. That's just what saving means. But live below your means implies that means are sufficient to live on. For many people, they're not. The federal poverty line for a single person is about $15,000 per year. Millions of people earn around this amount. Living below your means at $15,000 means choosing which necessity to skip. Even at the median income of around $56,000, living costs in many areas consume everything. Median rent in most major cities exceeds 30% of median income. In many cities, it exceeds 50%. Move somewhere cheaper, the advice givers say. Where the jobs are, where your family is, where you have any support network at all. The advice to live below your means means that provide room to live below. For millions of people, their means provide room for survival and nothing more. And inflation keeps making this worse. Wages have risen, but housing, healthcare, education, and childcare have risen faster. The share of income available for discretionary spending has shrunk for decades. Living below your means means that exceed living. That's not a choice, it's a circumstance. 8. The invest in yourself misdirection. The best investment is in yourself. Education, skills, personal development. This sounds inspiring. Improve your human capital and you'll earn more forever. What does invest in yourself cost? A bachelor's degree, $80,000, $200,000, and 4 years of reduced earnings. A master's degree, another $30,000, $100,000, and 2 more years. Professional certifications, hundreds to thousands of dollars plus study time. Even informal skill development costs money. Online courses, books, workshops. The time to engage with them, which is time not working. And the returns are uncertain. A degree doesn't guarantee higher income. Many graduates work in jobs that don't require their credentials. Some fields have oversupply. Student debt burdens can exceed the income boost. Meanwhile, the economy increasingly demands credentials for jobs that didn't previously require them. Credential inflation means you need more education to get the same job, but the education doesn't pay more than it used to. Invest in yourself is good advice for people who can afford the investment and have reasonable confidence in the return. For someone deciding whether to take on $50,000 in debt for a degree of uncertain value, it's not obviously correct. 9. The multiple income streams fantasy. Don't rely on one income. Build multiple streams, passive income, side hustles. This is advice for becoming wealthy. Let's examine who can follow it. Building passive income requires capital. Rental income requires properties. Dividend income requires stock portfolios. Royalties require creative work with ongoing sales. Where does the capital come from? From income that exceeds expenses, which we've established doesn't exist for most people. Side hustles require time. If you're already working 40 plus hours and handling family responsibilities, when does the side hustle happen? Late nights? Weekends? At the cost of health, relationships, and sanity? And most side hustles don't scale. Driving Uber, delivering food, selling crafts, these exchange time for money. They're not really income streams, they're just more jobs. Often jobs that pay less per hour than regular employment. The people with real multiple income streams are usually people who started with capital. They invested in assets that generate returns. They have passive income because they already had active income high enough to accumulate assets. For everyone else, multiple income streams means working more jobs, not building wealth. 10. The math that only works for the wealthy. Let me show you why all this advice fails with actual numbers. Scenario A. High income, $150,000. After taxes, to $100,000, $8,333 month. Fixed expenses, housing, transport, insurance. $4,000 month. Variable expenses, food, utilities, etc. $1,500 month. Remaining $2,833 month. This person can save 20% easily. Max out $401, $23,000 year. Build an emergency fund in months. Invest in diversified assets. Absorb emergencies without debt. Scenario B. Median income, $56. After taxes, $44,000, $3,667 month. Fixed expenses, housing, transport, insurance. $2,500 month. Variable expenses, food, utilities, etc. $1,000 month. Remaining, $167 month. This person can save maybe 4% with difficulty. Contribute to 401k only by sacrificing elsewhere. Build an emergency fund over years if nothing goes wrong. One emergency wipes out all progress. Scenario C. Low income, $30,000. After taxes, $26,000, $2,167 month. Fixed expenses, housing, transport, insurance. $1,600 month. Variable expenses, food, utilities, etc. $600 month. Remaining, -$33 month. This person can not save at all, not invest at all, not build emergency fund. Every month is a deficit covered by credit or desperation. The financial advice is written for scenario A. It's irrelevant to scenario C. It's marginal for scenario B. 11. The real advice nobody gives. Here's what honest financial advice for regular people would sound like. Your income is more important than your budgeting. The biggest lever is what you earn, not what you save. Focus energy on increasing income through better jobs, additional skills, or negotiation. A $10,000 raise does more than a lifetime of skipping lattes. One emergency can set you back years. This isn't advice so much as warning. The system is fragile when you don't have cushion. Everything you build can be wiped out by one medical bill, one car failure, one job loss. Understand this so you don't blame yourself when it happens. The game is rigged, but you still have to play. The system isn't fair. Knowing it's rigged doesn't exempt you from it. Do what you can within constraints while also working to change the constraints. Community matters more than individual financial optimization. People who share resources, housing, childcare, transportation do better than people who try to afford everything alone. The individual wealth building advice ignores that humans have always survived through cooperation. Don't take financial advice from rich people. Their context isn't yours. What worked for them started from a position you don't have. Their advice is autobiographical, not universal. 12. The real scam. The financial advice industry exists because it's profitable. Financial gurus sell books, courses, coaching, and speaking fees. Their income comes from telling you how to manage yours. They have incentive to make it sound achievable, to make it seem like your fault when it doesn't work. Banks and brokerages profit when you invest. They make fees whether your money grows or not. They have incentive to encourage investing regardless of whether you can afford it. The entire industry benefits from the narrative that financial success is individual, that the right knowledge and discipline leads to wealth, that failure is lack of discipline. This narrative obscures the structural factors that actually determine outcomes: income inequality, housing costs, healthcare costs, education costs. The factors that make wealth building possible or impossible independent of personal choices. The scam isn't that the advice is false. It's that it's presented as universal when it only works for some. It's that failure to follow advice designed for the wealthy is treated as personal failure. You're not bad with money. The money you have determines what's possible. Conclusion: advice for the real world. Here's what I'd actually tell someone without wealth. Survive first. Food, shelter, health, everything else comes after. Reduce fixed costs ruthlessly. The big expenses matter more than the small ones. A cheaper apartment saves more than skipping coffee. Increase income if at all possible. Any energy spent on budgeting is better spent on earning more. Build community. People who can help you are more valuable than a thin emergency fund. Don't feel guilty. The game is hard. The advice doesn't apply to your situation. Not following it isn't failure. Understand the system. Knowing why things are hard doesn't make them easy, but it stops you from blaming yourself for structural problems. The financial advice you've heard isn't wrong. It's just not for you. It's for people who already have what you need to get. People for whom the math works. People who can follow rules designed for their situation. Until the system changes, until income matches costs, until the structural barriers fall, the advice will remain a fantasy for most people. And the gurus will keep getting rich telling you it's your fault for not following it. If this changed how you think about financial advice, hit that subscribe button, because understanding whose interests advice serves is the first step to not being manipulated by it. See you in the comments. And remember, the best financial advice for most people is this: the problem isn't your choices, it's your options.